The blood had barely dried on her torn dress when Josephine Durant stumbled into Republic, Washington, on a freight wagon driven by a sympathetic miner who had found her collapsed on the mountain road 3 miles outside of town. It was the summer of 1889, and the mining settlement nestled in the Cascade Mountains had seen its share of tragedy, but nothing quite prepared the townsfolk for the sight of the young woman who could barely stand, her eyes hollow and distant, her clothing concealing wounds that told a story no one wanted to hear. Isaac Fletcher was shoeing a horse outside his stable when the wagon rolled past, and something about the way the woman held herself, like she was trying to disappear into her own skin, made him set down his hammer and wipe his hands on his leather apron. He had served 3 years as a cavalry scout before settling in Republic to work with horses, and he recognized the look of someone who had survived something terrible. The miner helped her down from the wagon seat, and Isaac watched as she swayed on her feet, one hand reaching out to steady herself against the rough wooden slats. "She needs the doctor," the miner called out to anyone listening. "Found her on the Kettle River Road. She has not said a word since I picked her up." Isaac moved forward without thinking, his boots kicking up dust as he crossed the wide dirt street. Up close, he could see the bruises on her wrists, the way she flinched when anyone moved too quickly near her. She was probably 22 or 23, with dark hair that had come loose from its pins and green eyes that seemed to look through everything rather than at it. "I will take her to Dr. Harrison," Isaac said quietly, keeping his voice low and steady the way he did with frightened horses. "Can you walk, miss, or should I fetch a wagon?" Josephine turned those hollow eyes on him, and for a moment he thought she would not answer. Then, in a voice like gravel and broken glass, she whispered, "I can walk." But she could not really. After 3 steps, her knees buckled, and Isaac caught her before she hit the ground. She went rigid in his arms, a small sound of fear escaping her throat, and he immediately loosened his hold while still supporting her weight. "I am not going to hurt you," he said, meeting her eyes and holding her gaze until some of the panic receded. "I am just going to help you get to the doctor, that is all. You have my word." Something in his face must have convinced her, because she gave a small nod. Isaac lifted her carefully, mindful of how she tensed at his touch, and carried her down the street toward the small building that served as Doc Harrison's office and surgery. People stared from doorways and windows, but Isaac ignored them all, focused only on the woman in his arms who weighed far less than she should. Doc Harrison was a grizzled man in his 50s who had seen everything from mining accidents to shootouts, but even he paused when Isaac carried Josephine through his door. "Set her on the examination table," he instructed, already rolling up his sleeves. "What happened to her?" "I do not know," Isaac said. "Miner found her on the mountain road." The doctor nodded and turned to Josephine. "Miss, I need to examine you to see what injuries you have. Is that acceptable?" Josephine stared at the ceiling and said nothing. "She might be in shock," Doc Harrison said to Isaac. "You can wait outside." But when Isaac moved toward the door, Josephine's hand shot out and grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. Her eyes were wide and frightened, and though she still did not speak, the message was clear. "Do not leave me alone with him." Isaac looked at the doctor, who sighed and nodded. "All right then, you can stay, but turn around and give her some privacy. Miss, I am going to need to see your injuries to treat them properly. I will be as gentle as I can." What followed was one of the longest hours of Isaac's life. He stood facing the wall, listening to the rustle of fabric and the doctor's occasional sharp intake of breath. He heard Josephine's breathing quicken several times, heard her bite back sounds of pain, and had to clench his fist to keep from turning around. When Doc Harrison finally told him he could face them again, Josephine was covered by a clean white sheet, her torn clothes in a pile on the floor. The doctor's face was grim. "She has been tortured," he said bluntly, keeping his voice low. "Burns, cuts, rope marks. Happened within the last few days based on the healing. Some of the wounds are infected and need cleaning. She also has broken ribs and severe bruising." Isaac felt rage build in his chest, hot and fierce. "Who did this to her?" "I cannot tell you that, but I can tell you she is lucky to be alive." Doc Harrison turned to Josephine. "Miss, I am going to clean and bandage your wounds now. It is going to hurt, but it needs to be done to prevent infection. Do you understand?" Josephine gave another small nod, her eyes still fixed on the ceiling. The treatment took another hour. Isaac stayed where she could see him, and whenever the pain became too much, Josephine would look at him like he was the only solid thing in a shifting world. He found himself talking to her in that same low, steady voice he used with horses, telling her about Republic, about the mountains, about anything and nothing, just to give her something to focus on besides the pain. When it was finally done, Doc Harrison straightened up and wiped his hands. She needs rest and time to heal. Does she have anywhere to stay? That was a good question. Isaac knew most of the boarding houses in town, and he also knew that a young woman alone, especially one in Josephine's condition, would be subject to gossip and worse. Republic was a rough town, full of miners and prospectors and men who did not always respect boundaries. "She can stay at my place," Isaac heard himself say. "I have a small house behind the stable with 2 rooms. She can have the bedroom, and I will sleep in the main room." Doc Harrison raised an eyebrow. "That is generous of you, Fletcher. You do not even know her name." "Does not matter," Isaac said. "She needs help, and I am offering it." The doctor looked at Josephine. "What do you say, miss? Are you comfortable with that arrangement?" For the first time since Isaac had seen her, something flickered in Josephine's eyes. Not quite hope, but maybe the smallest possibility of it. She looked at Isaac for a long moment, studying his face, and then nodded once. "All right then," Doc Harrison said. "I will check on her tomorrow. Keep the wounds clean and dry. Make sure she eats even if she does not want to. And Fletcher, if she starts running a fever, you come get me immediately, day or night." Isaac borrowed a wagon and drove Josephine the short distance to his property at the edge of town. The stable was a sturdy building he had constructed himself, and the small house behind it was simple but clean. He carried her inside, mindful of her injuries, and settled her on the bed in the single bedroom. "I will get you some water," he said, "and I think I have a clean nightgown that belonged to my sister. She left it here when she visited last year." He busied himself preparing the room, bringing fresh water in a basin, finding the nightgown folded in a trunk, setting out clean towels. Josephine watched him move around the space, and he was careful to keep his movements slow and predictable, never approaching her too quickly. "The door does not have a lock," he said, "but I can rig something up if you want. A bolt you can slide across on your side. I will not come in unless you ask me to." "Why are you helping me?" The words were so quiet he almost missed them, but they were the first full sentence she had spoken. Isaac stopped what he was doing and turned to face her. "Because you need help, and I can give it. That is reason enough. You do not know me. You do not know what happened. You do not know what I might have done." "I know enough," Isaac said firmly. "I know that whatever happened to you, you did not deserve it. I know that you were hurt and alone in a strange town. And I know that if I turned my back on you now, I could not live with myself." Tears welled up in Josephine's eyes, the first real emotion he had seen from her, besides fear. "I do not even know your name." "Isaac Fletcher," he said. "And you are?" "Josephine Durant." She said it like she was testing the name, making sure it still belonged to her. "Well, Miss Durant, you are safe here. I give you my word on that." He moved toward the door. "I will leave you to rest. If you need anything at all, you just call out. I will hear you." That first night, Isaac lay on the floor of his main room with a blanket and his thoughts. He could hear Josephine moving restlessly in the bedroom, occasionally crying out in her sleep. Each time it happened, he had to fight the urge to go check on her, knowing that his presence might frighten her more than comfort her. So he stayed where he was and listened to her nightmares, feeling helpless and furious in equal measure. Morning came with weak sunlight filtering through the windows. Isaac got up, started a fire in the stove, and began making breakfast. He was not much of a cook, but he could manage eggs and bacon and coffee. He was just plating the food when he heard the bedroom door creak open. Josephine stood in the doorway wearing his sister's nightgown, which hung loose on her thin frame. Her hair was tangled around her shoulders, and in the morning light he could see the bruises on her throat, the bandage peeking out from her collar. "Good morning," Isaac said, keeping his tone light. "I made breakfast. Nothing fancy, but it is hot." She moved into the room like a ghost, settling carefully into one of the 2 chairs at his small table. Isaac set a plate in front of her and took his own seat across the table, giving her space. For a while they ate in silence. Josephine picked at her food, managing only a few bites before setting down her fork. Isaac did not push her, just kept eating his own meal and pretending not to notice. "I was a school teacher," Josephine said suddenly, staring at her plate. "In Seattle. I came out here because they needed teachers in the mining camps. I thought I could make a difference, help the children learn to read and write. Isaac waited, sensing there was more. There was a man. His name was Robert Carlyle. He ran one of the smaller mining operations near Keller. He seemed respectable at first, educated. He said he wanted to support the school, help fund supplies. Her hands were shaking now, and she clasped them together in her lap. He started coming around more often, bringing gifts. I tried to be polite, but I was not interested. I told him so, as gently as I could. She fell silent, and Isaac could see her retreating back into herself. "You do not have to tell me," he said quietly. "Not unless you want to." But Josephine shook her head. Someone should know. Someone should know what he did. She took a shaky breath. He did not take the rejection well. He started following me, showing up at odd hours. Then one night 3 weeks ago, he and 2 of his men grabbed me when I was walking back to my boarding house. They took me to an old mine shaft up in the mountains. He said if he could not have me, he would make sure no one else would want me. The words hung in the air like smoke. Isaac felt sick, but he kept his face calm, knowing that if he showed the rage burning through him, it might frighten her. "They kept me there for 5 days, Josephine continued, her voice eerily flat now, as if she was reporting facts that had happened to someone else. "They burned me with hot irons, cut me with knives, used rope to tie me in positions that made my ribs crack. Robert would come every day and ask if I had changed my mind about him. When I said no, he would hurt me more." "How did you get away?" Isaac asked, his voice rough. One of the men, the younger one, he felt guilty. On the 5th night he gave me water and loosened my bonds. He said Robert was planning to kill me the next day, make it look like an accident. So, when they were all asleep, I ran. I do not remember much about the next day. I just kept moving, staying off the main roads, hiding when I heard anyone coming. Then I collapsed, and that miner found me. Isaac was quiet for a long moment, processing what she had told him. "This Robert Carlyle, he is still out there?" "I assume so. He probably thinks I died somewhere in the mountains." She finally looked up at him, and there was a fierce determination in her eyes that had not been there before. "I am not going back to Seattle. I am not running anymore. But I do not know how to live like this, with what he did to me, written all over my body. What he did is not who you are," Isaac said firmly. "You are not defined by the evil someone else chose to do." "Easy to say when you are not the one wearing the scars," Josephine said bitterly. "Maybe," Isaac acknowledged, "but it is still true." Over the following days, a routine developed. Isaac would wake early and tend to his horses, then come back to make breakfast. Josephine was usually awake by then, though she still slept poorly. Doc Harrison came by daily to check her wounds and change her bandages. Slowly, very slowly, the risk of infection decreased and the injuries began to heal. Isaac found himself thinking about Josephine at odd moments throughout the day. Not just about what had happened to her, but about who she was underneath the trauma. He saw glimpses of it sometimes, like when she noticed the books on his shelf and her face lit up with interest, or when she stood at the window watching the mountains and seemed almost peaceful. One evening, about a week after she had arrived, Isaac came back from the stable to find Josephine attempting to cook dinner. She was moving carefully, one hand pressed to her ribs, but there was soup simmering on the stove and bread warming beside it. "You should not be up doing this," Isaac said, though he could not help but smile at her determination. "I cannot just lie in bed forever," Josephine replied. "Besides, you have been taking care of me all this time. The least I can do is make a meal." They ate together, and for the first time the silence between them felt comfortable rather than heavy. After dinner, Josephine noticed Isaac's guitar leaning in the corner. "Do you play?" she asked. "A little. My mother taught me when I was young." He had not picked it up in months, too busy with work and too tired at night. "Would you play something now?" Isaac retrieved the guitar and settled into his chair, tuning the strings. He played an old folk song his mother had loved, letting the music fill the small space. When he looked up, Josephine's eyes were closed and there were tears on her cheeks, but they seemed like cleansing tears rather than painful ones. "That was beautiful," she said when he finished. "My mother used to sing. I had almost forgotten what it felt like to hear music." "What did she sing?" "Hymns, mostly. Folk songs sometimes. She had a lovely voice." Josephine opened her eyes. "She died when I was 16. Influenza. My father followed her 6 months later. I think he died of a broken heart more than anything else." "I am sorry," Isaac said. "That must have been hard." It was, but it also made me strong. I had to figure out how to survive on my own, how to make my own way. She smiled sadly. I thought I was so capable, so independent. Then Robert Carlyle showed me how quickly all of that could be taken away. He did not take it away, Isaac said. You survived. You escaped. You made it here. That takes more strength than most people ever need to find. Josephine looked at him for a long moment, and something shifted in her expression. Why do you say things like that to me? Because they are true. No one has ever spoken to me the way you do. Like, you actually see me, not just the wreck I have become. Isaac set the guitar aside and leaned forward in his chair. You are not a wreck, Josephine. You are a survivor. There is a difference. She stood up then, moving slowly across the small room to where he sat. Isaac, I need to tell you something. He waited, his heart beating faster for reasons he did not fully understand. When I was in that mine shaft, when the pain was so bad I thought I would die from it, I made myself a promise. I promised that if I survived, I would not waste the life I had been given. I would not let fear make me small. She took a deep breath. But I am scared all the time now. Scared of shadows, of sudden noises, of my own memories. I do not know how to keep that promise. Isaac stood up so they were facing each other, careful to maintain some distance. You do it one day at a time, one moment at a time, and you let people help you carry the weight until you were strong enough to carry it yourself. Is that what you are doing, helping me carry it? If you will let me. Josephine reached out slowly and took his hand. It was the first time she had initiated physical contact with anyone since her ordeal, and Isaac held perfectly still, letting her control the interaction. I would like that, she said softly. As the weeks passed, Josephine grew stronger. Her wounds healed, though the scars remained. Angry red lines and puckered burn marks that she tried to hide under long sleeves and high collars. Doc Harrison pronounced her on the mend, though he warned that the psychological wounds would take much longer to heal than the physical ones. Isaac found himself falling into a domestic rhythm with Josephine that felt startlingly natural. They cooked together, ate together, spent evenings reading or talking or listening to music. She told him about her time in Seattle, about the students she had taught and the books she loved. He told her about his years as a cavalry scout, about why he had left that life to work with horses, about his family back in Missouri. But there was always a careful distance between them, a line neither of them crossed. Isaac was acutely aware of what Josephine had been through, of how fragile her trust still was. The last thing he wanted was to make her feel pressured or uncomfortable in any way. So, even though he found himself thinking about her constantly, even though he caught himself watching her when she was not looking, he kept those feelings locked tight inside. Josephine, for her part, seemed to be wrestling with her own demons. Sometimes Isaac would wake in the night to hear her pacing in her room. Or he would catch her staring at nothing with that hollow look back in her eyes. On those days, he would stay close, talking to her about inconsequential things, reminding her without words that she was not alone. One afternoon, about a month after Josephine had arrived in Republic, Isaac was working in the stable when a stranger rode into town. He was a well-dressed man on an expensive horse, and something about the way he carried himself set Isaac's teeth on edge. When the man dismounted and started asking questions about a young woman who might have come through town, Isaac felt cold dread settle in his stomach. He waited until the stranger left, then walked quickly back to the house. Josephine was sitting at the table mending one of his shirts, and she looked up with a smile when he entered. The smile died when she saw his face. What is wrong? There was a man here asking questions, well-dressed, riding a bay horse. Said he was looking for a young woman who went missing from one of the mining camps. The shirt fell from Josephine's hands. Did he give a name? No, but I have a bad feeling about it. Josephine stood up, her face pale. It could be one of Robert's men. He must have realized I did not die in the mountains. Isaac moved to the window and looked out carefully. The stranger was at the other end of town now, talking to someone outside the general store. We need to be careful, he said. If this man is working for Carlyle, we cannot let him know you are here. Maybe I should leave, Josephine said, and Isaac could hear the fear in her voice. I do not want to bring trouble to you. You are not going anywhere, Isaac said firmly. He turned to face her. This is not your fault, Josephine. None of it is your fault, and I am not going to let anyone hurt you again. You do not know what Robert is capable of. Then tell me. So she did. She told him about Robert Carlyle's reputation in the mining camps, about the men who had crossed him and disappeared, about the way local authorities seemed reluctant to investigate anything connected to his operations. She told him about the wealth Carlyle had accumulated, and how he used it to buy loyalty and silence. "He is a dangerous man," Josephine finished, "and he does not like losing." Isaac thought for a moment, then made a decision. "All right, here is what we are going to do. You are going to stay inside and out of sight for the next few days. I will keep an eye on this stranger and see what he is up to, and I am going to talk to Sheriff Donovan." "The sheriff?" Josephine looked doubtful. "What if he is in Carlyle's pocket too?" "Donovan is a good man. He served in the army with my brother. I trust him." Isaac moved closer to her. "I know you are scared. I know you have every reason not to trust the authorities. But we cannot fight this alone." Josephine wrapped her arms around herself, and Isaac could see her trembling. Without thinking, he stepped forward and pulled her into a gentle embrace. She stiffened for just a moment, then relaxed against him, her head resting on his chest. "I do not want you to get hurt because of me," she whispered. "That is not going to happen," Isaac said, though he had no way of knowing if that was true. "We are going to get through this together." They stood like that for a long moment, and Isaac felt something shift between them, some invisible barrier beginning to crack. When Josephine finally pulled back, there was color in her cheeks and a new determination in her eyes. "All right," she said, "we do this your way, but Isaac, promise me something." "What?" "Promise me that if things go bad, if Robert shows up here, you will not try to be a hero. Promise me you will think of your own safety." Isaac could not make that promise, so instead he just squeezed her hand and went to find the sheriff. Sheriff Thomas Donovan was a bear of a man with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He listened carefully as Isaac explained the situation, his expression growing grimmer with each detail. "I have heard of Carlyle," Donovan said when Isaac finished. "Nothing I can prove, but enough rumors to make me uneasy. If what Miss Durant says is true, we have got a serious problem." "What can we do?" "Officially, not much unless she's willing to file charges, and even then, we would need evidence." Donovan leaned back in his chair. "Unofficially, I can ask around about this stranger, see what I can find out. And I can make sure folks know to keep an eye out for anyone else who comes asking questions." "What about Josephine's safety?" "Keep her out of sight like you planned. I will stop by your place regular, make my presence known. Might discourage anyone thinking of causing trouble." The sheriff fixed Isaac with a penetrating stare. "You care about this girl, do not you?" Isaac did not hesitate. "Yes." "Then you better be prepared for what that might mean. If Carlyle is as dangerous as she says, he will not give up easily." "I know." Donovan nodded slowly. "All right then, watch your back, Fletcher, and if anything happens, you come get me right away." Isaac returned home to find Josephine pacing the main room, her arms still wrapped around herself. She looked up anxiously when he entered. "What did he say?" Isaac relayed the conversation, and some of the tension left Josephine's shoulders. "So we wait, and we stay alert." That night, Isaac moved his bedroll to a spot near the front door where he could see anyone approaching. He kept his rifle close and slept lightly, waking at every small sound. Around midnight, he heard Josephine's door open, and she emerged wrapped in a blanket. "I cannot sleep," she said quietly. "Me neither." She came and sat beside him on the floor, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Tell me something good, something about your life before all of this." So Isaac told her about growing up on his family's farm in Missouri, about learning to ride before he could walk, about the day his father had given him his first horse. He told her about his brother and sister, about summer nights catching fireflies and winter mornings skating on frozen ponds. "It sounds wonderful," Josephine said wistfully. "I grew up in a city. We did not have space for those kinds of adventures. What did you do for fun?" "I read, constantly. I would sneak into my father's library and stay up all night reading by candlelight." She smiled at the memory. "He pretended not to notice, but I think he was secretly pleased that I loved books as much as he did." "Is that why you became a teacher?" "Partly, but mostly because I wanted to give other children the gift my parents gave me, the love of learning and stories and ideas." Her smile faded. "I only taught in the mining camp for 3 months before Robert showed up. I wonder what happened to my students after I disappeared." The school probably found another teacher, Isaac said gently. I hope so. Those children deserve better than what that hard life offers them. They talked through most of the night, their voices low, trading stories and memories. Isaac learned that Josephine loved poetry and hated oysters and was terrified of spiders. She learned that he had once broken his arm falling off a roof, and that his favorite color was the blue of a morning sky, and that he had been in love once before with a girl who had married his best friend instead. Do you regret it? Josephine asked. Losing her? I used to, Isaac admitted. But now I think things worked out the way they were meant to. She is happy with him, and I am here. Here with a broken woman hiding from a madman, Josephine said bitterly. Isaac turned to look at her directly. Here with the bravest person I have ever met. I am not brave, Isaac. I am terrified every moment of every day. Being brave does not mean you are not scared. It means you keep going, despite the fear. He reached out and gently took her hand. You amaze me, Josephine. Your strength, your resilience, your kindness even after everything you have been through. I have met hardened soldiers with less courage than you show every single day. Josephine's eyes filled with tears. How can you see me that way? How can you look at me and not see all the ways I'm broken? Because that is not what I see when I look at you. Isaac squeezed her hand. I see a woman who refused to let evil win. I see someone who survived the worst another human could do and came out the other side still able to smile, still able to laugh, still able to hope. That is not broken, Josephine. That is extraordinary. Isaac, she whispered, and there was something in her voice that made his heart race. Yes? I need you to know something, in case things go badly, in case Robert finds me. She took a shaky breath. These past weeks with you have been a gift I never expected. You made me feel human again. You made me feel like maybe I could have a life after all of this. And I need you to know that I am grateful for that. I am grateful for you. Josephine, nothing is going to happen to you. You cannot promise that. Maybe not. But I can promise that I will do everything in my power to keep you safe. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. You have become important to me. More important than I knew someone could be. She looked at him with wonder in her eyes. You really mean that? Every word. For a moment Isaac thought she might pull away, retreat back behind the walls she had built to protect herself. But instead, she leaned forward slowly, giving him plenty of time to move back if he wanted to. He stayed perfectly still as she pressed her lips to his in a kiss that was tentative and sweet and full of promise. When she pulled back, she was crying, but she was also smiling. I did not think I would ever want to be touched again, she said, but with you, it is different. You make me feel safe. You are safe, Isaac promised. Always. They spent the rest of the night talking and occasionally kissing, each touch gentle and careful, building trust and intimacy. By the time dawn broke, Isaac felt like something fundamental had shifted between them, like they had crossed some invisible threshold into new territory. The stranger stayed in Republic for 2 more days, asking questions and watching people with cold, calculating eyes. Isaac kept Josephine hidden and made sure to be seen around town acting normally, giving no hint that anything was amiss. Sheriff Donovan made his presence known, stopping by the stable frequently and making it clear he was keeping an eye on strangers. On the 3rd day, the man rode out of town heading north. Donovan came by that evening to give Isaac the news. He is gone, but I do not think this is over, the sheriff said. Men like that do not give up easy. He will report back to whoever sent him, and they will decide what to do next. So we stay vigilant, Isaac said. Exactly. Donovan paused. How is Miss Durant holding up? Better than I would be in her situation. The sheriff nodded thoughtfully. Word of advice, Fletcher. You care about this girl. I can see that plain as day. But be careful. Men like Carlyle, they do not just hurt their enemies. They hurt everything their enemies care about. I know the risk. Do you? Because from where I am standing, you are in deep whether you realize it or not. And so is she. After the sheriff left, Isaac found Josephine in the small garden plot beside the house. She had been tending it over the past few weeks, coaxing vegetables from the rocky soil. It seemed to give her peace, working with the earth and watching things grow. The stranger is gone, he told her. She looked up, dirt on her hands and hope in her eyes. Does that mean it is over? I do not think so, but it means we have some breathing room. Josephine stood and brushed off her hands. Isaac, I have been thinking, I cannot hide forever. Eventually I need to face this. Face him. We will, Isaac said, when the time is right and we have a plan. But not today. She moved closer to him. I do not want to spend whatever time we have living in fear. I want to actually live, to have something good to hold on to. What are you saying? Josephine reached up and cupped his face in her hands. I am saying that I am falling in love with you, Isaac Fletcher, and I do not want to waste another moment pretending I am not. Isaac felt his breath catch. Josephine, I am already in love with you. I have been for weeks. This time when they kissed, it was deeper, more certain. Isaac was still careful, still mindful of what she had been through, but Josephine kissed him back with a passion that showed she was ready for this, ready for him. I want to be with you, she whispered against his lips. But Isaac, I need you to know what you are getting into. My body, the scars Robert left, they are not pretty. I am not the untouched innocent you might want. Isaac pulled back far enough to look her in the eyes. I know what happened to you, and it does not change how I feel. You are beautiful to me, Josephine, every part of you. You have not seen the scars. Then show me. She hesitated, fear and vulnerability warring in her expression. Then, slowly, she began to unbutton her blouse. Isaac helped her, his movements gentle and reverent. When the fabric fell away, he could see the bandages Doc Harrison had applied, and the edges of scarred skin peeking out from underneath. With shaking hands, Josephine began to unwrap the bandages. What they revealed made Isaac's heart break and his rage ignite in equal measure. Long, angry scars crisscrossed her shoulders and arms. Circular burn marks dotted her ribs and stomach. There were rope burns on her wrists and ankles, and what looked like knife wounds along her sides. Josephine watched his face, waiting for disgust or horror or pity. Instead, Isaac stepped forward and gently traced one of the scars with his fingertips. You survived this? He whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He bent and pressed a soft kiss to the scar. You survived. He moved to the next one, a burn mark on her shoulder. You survived this. Another kiss. Tears streamed down Josephine's face as Isaac worked his way across her body, kissing each scar and whispering the same words like a benediction. You survived this. You survived. You survived. By the time he finished, they were both crying. Josephine pulled him close and held him like he was her lifeline, and Isaac wrapped his arms around her and vowed silently that he would spend the rest of his life helping her heal from what Robert Carlyle had done. I love you, Josephine whispered. I love you so much. I love you too, Isaac said, and I am going to marry you, Josephine Durant, if you will have me. She pulled back to look at him, shock written across her face. You want to marry me? More than anything. I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a few weeks, but I also know that I do not want to spend a single day without you. You are my future, if you will let me be yours. Yes, Josephine said, laughing through her tears. Yes, I will marry you. They made plans to wed as soon as possible, not wanting to wait when neither of them knew what the future might hold. Sheriff Donovan agreed to stand as witness, and Doc Harrison offered to host the small ceremony in his home. Josephine made herself a simple white dress from fabric she bought at the general store, and Isaac borrowed his best suit from a friend. The ceremony took place on a sunny afternoon 2 weeks later. Josephine looked beautiful in her homemade dress, her dark hair pinned up with wildflowers Isaac had picked that morning. They said their vows in Doc Harrison's parlor with the doctor and the sheriff as witnesses, promising to love and honor each other for as long as they both lived. When Isaac kissed his bride, he tasted salt from her happy tears and felt a completeness he had never known before. This was what he had been looking for, without knowing it. This woman who had survived hell and come out stronger. This love that felt both fierce and tender. They celebrated with a simple dinner, and then Isaac carried Josephine over the threshold of their home as his wife. It felt right in a way that made Isaac's chest tight with emotion, having her here as part of his life officially and forever. That night they lay together in the bedroom that was now theirs to share, and Josephine traced patterns on Isaac's chest with her fingertips. I never thought I would have this, she said quietly. After what happened, I thought this kind of intimacy, this kind of happiness was lost to me forever. You deserve all the happiness in the world, Isaac said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. So do you, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know that. They made love slowly and carefully that night, learning each other's bodies and boundaries. Isaac was endlessly patient, always checking that Josephine was comfortable, always letting her set the pace. And Josephine found that with Isaac, the act that had once been tainted by violence and pain could be reclaimed as something beautiful and healing. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the sheets, Josephine felt something she had not felt since before Robert Carlyle. Complete peace. But their peace was not to last. 3 days after the wedding, a group of 6 men rode into Republic. They were rough-looking characters with guns on their hips and mean glints in their eyes. Isaac was at the stable when they arrived, and his blood ran cold when he recognized one of them from Josephine's description. This was one of the men who had helped torture her. He quickly made his way back to the house, his heart pounding. "Josephine, we have got trouble. Stay inside and stay away from the windows." Her face went pale, but she nodded and immediately moved away from the front of the house. Isaac grabbed his rifle and positioned himself where he could watch the street. The men split up, 3 going into the saloon and 3 walking through town asking questions. It did not take long before one of them was heading toward Isaac's stable. Sheriff Donovan appeared as if from nowhere, intercepting the man before he could reach Isaac's property. There was a brief, tense conversation that Isaac could not hear, and then the stranger walked back toward town, casting dark looks over his shoulder. Donovan came to Isaac's door a few minutes later, his expression grim. "They are looking for her. They know she is in Republic somewhere." "How?" "Best I can figure, that first stranger did enough asking around to narrow down the possibilities. These men are here to finish the job." The sheriff's hand rested on his gun. "I ran them off for now, told them I did not take kindly to armed men harassing my town. But they will be back, probably after dark." "What do we do?" Isaac asked, though he already knew the answer. "We end this. One way or another, this has to end." Donovan looked past Isaac to where Josephine stood in the shadows. "Miss, I need you to be brave one more time. I need you to testify to what Robert Carlyle did to you, official-like. I will take your statement and telegraph it to the territorial marshal. With your testimony and Carlyle's men showing up here looking for you, we should have enough to issue a warrant for his arrest." "And if the marshal does not care?" Josephine asked, her voice steady despite her fear. "What if Carlyle has bought him off too?" "Then we handle it ourselves," Donovan said bluntly. "But we do this by the book first. Give the law a chance to work." Josephine looked at Isaac, and he gave her an encouraging nod. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. "All right, I will give my statement." They spent the next hour in the sheriff's office while Josephine recounted every horrible detail of her ordeal. Isaac sat beside her, holding her hand while she spoke, feeling rage build in his chest with every word. By the time she finished, there were tears on her cheeks, but her voice never wavered. "That is one of the bravest things I have ever witnessed," Donovan said as he signed and sealed the document. "I will get this to the telegraph office right now. With any luck, we will have a response by morning." "And what do we do about the men outside?" Isaac asked. "I have already sent word to some of the other men in town, the ones I trust. We will keep watch tonight, make sure no one tries anything." Donovan met Isaac's eyes. "You stay home with your wife and keep the rifle loaded. If anyone tries to get in, you defend yourselves. I will make sure the law sees it as self-defense." They returned home as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the street. Isaac checked all the windows and doors, making sure everything was secured. Josephine sat at the table, her hands clasped together, trying to steady herself. "I am scared, Isaac," she admitted. "I know, so am I." He sat down beside her and took her hands in his. "But we are not alone, and we are not helpless. Whatever happens tonight, we face it together. I do not want you to get hurt because of me. And I do not want you to get hurt, period. We are married now, Josephine. Your battles are my battles. Your enemies are my enemies. That is what it means to be a family." She leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "How did I get so lucky to find you?" "I think I am the lucky one," Isaac said, kissing the top of her head. They waited as darkness fell, the tension ratcheting higher with each passing hour. Isaac kept watch by the window, while Josephine tried to distract herself by reading, though he could see she was not turning the pages. Around midnight, they heard voices outside, men talking in low tones. Isaac moved away from the window and positioned himself by the door, rifle in hand. "Stay back," he told Josephine. There was a knock at the door, loud and demanding. "We know you have got the Durant woman in there. Send her out and we will leave the rest of you alone." Isaac said nothing, his finger on the trigger. "Last chance," the voice called. "We can do this easy or we can do this hard." Before Isaac could respond, there was a gunshot from somewhere in the street, followed by Sheriff Donovan's booming voice. "You boys are trespassing and disturbing the peace. I suggest you mount up and ride out while you still can." "This is none of your business, Sheriff," the man outside shouted back. "When armed men threaten my citizens, it becomes my business. Now you have got a choice. You can leave peaceful-like, or you can spend the night in my jail. And if you draw those guns, my deputies and I will have no choice but to respond in kind." There was a long, tense silence. Isaac could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Then came the sound of boots retreating, horses being mounted, and the group riding away at speed. It was not until their hoofbeats had faded completely that Isaac allowed himself to lower the rifle. Josephine rushed to him, and he pulled her close, feeling her trembling against him. "It is all right," he murmured. "They are gone." But even as he said it, Isaac knew this was far from over. Morning brought news from the territorial marshal. The response to Sheriff Donovan's telegram was not encouraging. The marshal stated that while Josephine's testimony was noted, there was insufficient evidence to issue a warrant for Robert Carlyle's arrest without additional witnesses or physical proof. "So that is it?" Josephine asked, her voice hollow. "He just gets away with it?" "Not if I can help it," Donovan said grimly. "I am going to ride to Keller myself, see what I can dig up, talk to people, look around. There have to be others who know what Carlyle is really like." "That could be dangerous," Isaac pointed out. "So is leaving this unresolved? Those men will be back, Fletcher, and next time they might not be scared off so easy." The sheriff stood up, his jaw set with determination. "In the meantime, you two stay alert. Do not take any unnecessary risks, and if anything happens, you get word to me immediately." After Donovan left, Isaac and Josephine tried to return to some semblance of normalcy, but it was difficult with the threat hanging over them. Josephine threw herself into fixing up their home, sewing curtains and planting more vegetables in the garden. Isaac worked longer hours at the stable, partly to keep busy and partly to keep an eye on the comings and goings in town. A week passed with no word from the sheriff, then another. Isaac was beginning to worry when Donovan finally returned, looking dusty and tired, but with a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. "I found 3 other women," he announced. 3 other women that Carlyle hurt. They were too scared to speak up before, but when I told them about Josephine, about what she had survived and that she was willing to testify, 2 of them agreed to add their voices to hers. "That is wonderful," Isaac said, feeling hope spark in his chest. "It gets better. I also found the young man who helped Josephine escape. He is willing to testify against Carlyle in exchange for clemency. With his testimony plus the women's statements, the marshal has agreed to issue a warrant." Josephine pressed a hand to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. "He is really going to be arrested?" "Deputies are on their way to Keller right now to bring him in. Should have him in custody within the week." Donovan smiled, the first genuine smile Isaac had seen from the gruff lawman. "You did it, Miss Josephine. You spoke up, and you gave other women the courage to do the same. Carlyle is going to face justice for what he did." The tears spilled over then, and Josephine began to sob, great heaving cries that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside. Isaac wrapped his arms around her and held her while she cried, and he knew these were not tears of sadness, but of relief, of vindication, of finally being able to release some of the fear and anger she had been carrying. "It is over," she kept saying. "It is really over." "It is over," Isaac confirmed. "You are safe now. We both are." The arrest of Robert Carlyle sent shockwaves through the territory. The trial that followed was one of the most talked about events in Washington's recent history. Josephine testified, as did the other 2 women and the young man who had helped her escape. The evidence was overwhelming, and the jury returned a guilty verdict after only 3 hours of deliberation. Carlyle was sentenced to 20 years in the territorial prison. As he was led away in chains, he looked directly at Josephine with pure hatred in his eyes. But Josephine looked back at him without flinching, her head held high, and Isaac felt immense pride in his wife's strength. "He cannot hurt you anymore," Isaac said as they left the courthouse. "He cannot hurt anyone anymore." "I know," Josephine said, "and knowing that makes all the difference." Life slowly returned to normal after the trial, or at least to a new normal that included Josephine as a permanent and beloved part of Republic. She started teaching again, this time at a small schoolhouse the town had built, with funds from several of the successful mining operations. The children adored her, and Isaac loved watching her come home each day with stories about their progress and antics. Their home became a place of warmth and laughter, filled with the small domestic rituals that made up a life together. Josephine's nightmares grew less frequent, though they never completely disappeared. On the nights when the past came back to haunt her, Isaac would hold her and remind her that she was safe, that she was loved, that she had survived and built something beautiful from the ashes. 2 years after their wedding, Josephine came to Isaac with news that made his heart soar. She was pregnant. They would have a child, a son or daughter, who would be born into a home full of love and security. "I am terrified," Josephine admitted. "What if I am not a good mother? What if the things that happen to me affect how I raise our child?" "You are going to be an amazing mother," Isaac assured her. "You are kind and patient and strong. Our child will be lucky to have you." "To have us," Josephine corrected. "I could not do this without you, Isaac. You saved me in so many ways." "We saved each other," Isaac said, pulling her close. "That is what love does." Their son was born in the spring of 1892, a healthy boy with Josephine's green eyes and Isaac's dark hair. They named him James, after Josephine's father, and from the moment Isaac held his son for the first time, he felt his world expand in ways he had never imagined. Watching Josephine with their baby was a revelation. Despite her fears, she was a natural mother, attentive and loving, and endlessly patient. The scars on her body, which had once represented only pain and trauma, took on new meaning as she used them to teach their son about courage and survival as he grew old enough to ask about them. "These scars tell a story," she would say, tracing the lines on her arms. "They tell the story of a time when bad things happened, but I did not give up. I survived, and I found my way to the people I love. The scars remind me that I am stronger than I ever knew." As James grew, the Fletcher home became a center of community and Republic. Josephine's former students would stop by to visit, and Isaac's stable became known throughout the territory for the quality of his horses and his fair dealing. They built a good life, full of purpose and connection. 5 years after James was born, Josephine gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Grace. The house that had once seemed spacious now felt comfortably full, alive with the sounds of children playing and laughing. Isaac built additions to accommodate their growing family, and Josephine balanced teaching with raising their children, supported by a community that had come to love and respect her. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac and Josephine stood together on the porch of their home, watching their children play in the yard. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. "Do you ever think about what your life might have been like if things had gone differently?" Josephine asked. "If you had not been at the stable that day I arrived in Republic?" Isaac considered the question. "Sometimes, but I cannot imagine my life without you in it. Every choice I made, every path I took, led me to that moment, led me to you." "I think about it all the time," Josephine admitted. "I think about how close I came to not surviving, to not making it to Republic, to never meeting you. And I am grateful every single day that I did survive, that I got to have this life with you." "I am grateful too," Isaac said, wrapping his arm around her waist. "You made me understand what it really means to love someone, to build a life with them. You made me a better man. You were always a good man. Isaac Fletcher, you just helped me remember that good men exist." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You know what the best part is?" "What?" "The scars do not hurt anymore. When I look at them now, I do not see what Robert did to me. I see what I survived to get here. I see the life I built because I refused to give up. They are part of my story, but they do not define me." Isaac kissed the top of her head, feeling a rush of love so profound it almost hurt. "You are the strongest person I have ever known." "I had a good teacher," Josephine said with a smile. Their children called out then, wanting their parents to come play, and Isaac and Josephine descended the porch steps hand in hand. As they joined their family in the yard, Isaac reflected on the strange and winding path that had brought them together. Pain and trauma had started their story, but love and resilience had written the rest of it. The years continued to pass, bringing new challenges and joys. James grew into a thoughtful young man who wanted to study law, inspired by his mother's courage in testifying against Robert Carlyle. Emma showed a talent for music and could often be found playing the guitar Isaac had taught her to use. Grace had her mother's love of teaching and would line up her dolls and stuffed animals for lessons in the yard. Josephine continued teaching until she was in her 50s, influencing generations of children in Republic and the surrounding areas. She also began writing, putting her experiences down on paper, in the hope that other survivors might find strength in her story. Her memoir, published when she was 45, became widely read throughout the territory and beyond. Isaac expanded his stable into a successful ranch, breeding horses that were sought after throughout Washington and Oregon. But his greatest pride was always his family, the home he had built with Josephine, and the community they had become part of. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a celebration that brought together nearly the entire town. Sheriff Donovan, now retired but still sharp as ever, gave a toast that had everyone laughing and crying. 25 years ago, he said, I watched a broken young woman arrive in Republic with nothing but scars and determination. And I watched a good man decide to help her, not because he wanted anything in return, but because it was the right thing to do. What I did not know then was that I was witnessing the beginning of the greatest love story I have ever seen. Isaac and Josephine Fletcher have shown us all what it means to choose love over fear, hope over despair, and healing over bitterness. They have built a family and a life that stands as a testament to the power of the human spirit. So, raise your glasses with me now to Isaac and Josephine, to 25 years of marriage, and to the many more years to come. The room erupted in cheers and applause, and Isaac pulled Josephine close, kissing her soundly to the delight of their children and friends. Here is to the next 25 years, he said, and all the years after that, Josephine added. As they danced together later that evening, moving slowly to music played by their daughter Emma and her friends, Isaac thought about everything they had been through, the pain and fear that had brought Josephine to Republic, the slow building of trust between them. The moment he had kissed her scars and whispered that she had survived, their wedding, their children, the life they had painstakingly built together. "What are you thinking about?" Josephine asked, reading his contemplative expression. "I am thinking about how lucky I am. How grateful I am that you stumbled into my life all those years ago." "Stumbled is putting it nicely," Josephine said with a laugh. "I was half dead and completely broken." "You were never broken," Isaac corrected gently. "Hurt, yes. Traumatized, absolutely, but never broken. Your spirit was still there, Josephine. I could see it even then." "You saw more than I could see in myself," she said. "You gave me the space and time to heal, and you loved me through the worst of it. You showed me that I could trust again, that I could love again, that I could build a future worth having." "We did that together," Isaac insisted. "You did the hard work of healing. I just stood beside you while you did it." Josephine stopped dancing and cupped his face in her hands, looking at him with eyes full of love and gratitude. "You did so much more than that. You gave me hope when I had none. You showed me that not all men are cruel, that touch could be gentle, that love could be real and lasting. You kissed my scars and told me I survived, and you made me believe it was true." Isaac felt tears prick his eyes. Even after 25 years, Josephine could still move him to his core with her words, with the depth of emotion she carried. "I love you, Josephine Fletcher," he said, "more today than yesterday and less than tomorrow." "I love you too, Isaac, always." They kissed then, surrounded by family and friends, celebrating a love that had overcome darkness and pain to become something beautiful and enduring. As they grew older, Isaac and Josephine became the couple that others looked to for advice and inspiration. Young people getting married would ask them the secret to a lasting relationship, and they always gave the same answer: honesty, patience, and the choice to love even when it is hard. Their children grew up and started families of their own. James became a lawyer and fought for justice for the vulnerable and oppressed, carrying on his mother's legacy. Emma married a musician and toured the country performing, always returning to Republic between tours to visit her parents. Grace opened her own school in a neighboring town, teaching with the same passion and dedication her mother had shown. Isaac and Josephine became grandparents, and then great-grandparents, their legacy extending through the generations. The scars on Josephine's body faded with time, becoming silvery lines that were barely visible. But the strength those scars represented never faded. She carried it with her always, a reminder of what she had survived and overcome. On a warm summer evening in 1920, Isaac and Josephine sat together on their porch, watching the sunset just as they had done so many times before. They were both in their 70s now, their hair gray and their movements slower, but their love had only deepened with time. "Do you remember the first time we sat on this porch together?" Josephine asked. "You had just brought me home from Doc Harrison's office." "I remember," Isaac said. "You were so scared, so hurt. I wanted to protect you from the whole world." "You did protect me. You still do." Josephine reached for his hand, her fingers interlacing with his in a gesture that had become second nature over the decades. "I have been thinking about our story lately, about how much pain I was in when we met, and how different my life is now. If someone had told me back then that I would have this, all of this, I never would have believed them." "I am glad you were wrong," Isaac said with a smile. "Me too." Josephine leaned her head on his shoulder. "You know what I realized? The scars do not just remind me that I survived Robert Carlyle. They remind me of you, of the moment when you kissed each one and whispered those words. That was the moment I began to truly heal, Isaac. That was when I started to believe I could have a future." Isaac pressed a kiss to the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "You gave me a future too, you know. Before you, I was just going through the motions, working, eating, sleeping, repeat. You made me come alive." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and stars began to appear. Inside the house, they could hear their grandchildren laughing, visiting for the summer as they often did. The sounds of family, of life continuing forward, filled the evening air. "If you could go back," Josephine said quietly, "back to that day when the miner brought me into town, would you do it all again? Knowing everything that came after, all the danger and fear and uncertainty?" Isaac did not hesitate. "In a heartbeat, every moment of it, the good and the bad, because it led to this, to us, to the life we built together." "That is the right answer," Josephine said with a satisfied smile. "It is not just the right answer, it is the true answer." Isaac squeezed her hand. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Josephine Fletcher. You always have been." As they sat together in the growing darkness, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had created, Isaac reflected on the incredible journey they had taken. From that first moment when he had seen her stumble off the wagon, hurt and afraid, to this peaceful evening surrounded by family and love, it had been a remarkable path. The scars Josephine bore would always be part of her story, but they had become symbols of triumph rather than tragedy. She had survived torture and trauma, had faced her abuser in court, had rebuilt her life from nothing. And through it all, Isaac had been by her side, supporting her, loving her, showing her that she was worthy of all the good things life had to offer. Their love story was not conventional. It had started in pain and fear, but it had blossomed into something beautiful and lasting, a partnership built on mutual respect, deep affection, and unwavering commitment. They had faced challenges together and overcome them. They had raised a family and contributed to their community. They had lived a life worth living. As the years continued to pass, Isaac and Josephine remained devoted to each other. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, a family tree that spread wide and strong from the roots they had planted together. When Isaac was 78, he became ill with pneumonia. Josephine nursed him through it with the same fierce determination she had shown in surviving her own ordeal. She sat by his bedside day and night, reading to him, talking to him, refusing to let him give up. "You do not get to leave me yet, Isaac Fletcher," she told him firmly. "We have at least another 10 years together, and I intend to hold you to that." Isaac recovered, and they did indeed have more years together, though they were years marked by the increasing frailties of age. But their love never wavered, never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, more precious, as they both understood how finite their time together was. On a bright autumn day in 1925, Isaac and Josephine took a walk through Republic, moving slowly but enjoying the crisp air and colorful leaves. The town had changed so much since that first day Josephine had arrived, growing from a rough mining settlement into a proper community. But some things remained the same. The stable where Isaac had first seen Josephine was still standing, though it was run by their son, James, now. The house they had built together still stood at the edge of town, filled with memories of a lifetime. "We made a good life here," Josephine said, looking around at the familiar streets and buildings. "We did," Isaac agreed. "A very good life." "No regrets?" Isaac stopped walking and turned to face his wife, this woman who had been his partner for over 3 decades. Her hair was white now, and her face was lined with age, but her green eyes still sparkled with the same spirit that had drawn him to her all those years ago. "Not a single one," he said. "How could I regret anything that led me to you?" Josephine smiled, that beautiful smile that still had the power to make his heart skip a beat. "You old charmer? After all these years, you still know exactly what to say." "It is easy when it is true." They continued their walk, hand in hand, two people who had found each other in the darkness and built a life in the light. The scars on Josephine's body were barely visible now, hidden beneath her clothing and faded with time. But the strength they represented was as present as ever, woven into every aspect of who she had become. When Isaac was 82 and Josephine was 81, they sat together on their porch one final time. Isaac had been declining for several weeks, his body finally giving out after a life well lived. Josephine sat beside him, holding his hand, both of them knowing that their time together was coming to an end. "I am not afraid," Isaac said, his voice weak but steady. "I have had a good life, a wonderful life, because of you." "Because of us," Josephine corrected, tears streaming down her face. "We did this together, Isaac, every step of the way." "Promise me something," Isaac said, squeezing her hand with what little strength he had left. "Promise me you will keep living after I am gone, really living, not just existing. You survived so much to get here. Do not waste a single moment of whatever time you have left." "I promise," Josephine whispered, "but you have to promise me something too." "Anything. Promise me you will wait for me, on the other side. Promise me this is not the end for us." Isaac smiled, and despite his failing health, it was a smile full of love and certainty. "I will be waiting, and when you get there, we will start the next adventure together. I love you, Isaac Fletcher." "I love you too, Josephine Fletcher, always and forever." Isaac passed away peacefully that evening, surrounded by his wife and children. Josephine held his hand until the very end, and even after he was gone, she sat with him for a long time, memorizing his face, saying goodbye to the love of her life. The funeral was attended by what seemed like half the territory. Isaac had touched many lives during his years in Republic, but none more profoundly than Josephine's. As she stood by his grave, supported by her children, she thought about the incredible journey they had taken together. He had seen her at her worst, broken and scared and scarred, and he had chosen to love her anyway. He had kissed her wounds and whispered that she had survived, and in doing so, had given her the courage to build a life worth living. He had been her partner, her confidant, her greatest supporter, and she had loved him with every fiber of her being. Josephine lived for another 7 years after Isaac's death, and she kept her promise to him. She continued to be an active part of her family's lives, attending graduations and weddings, and welcoming new great-great-grandchildren. She published another book, this one about love and loss and resilience. She traveled a bit, seeing parts of the country she had never visited before, but more than anything, she lived with gratitude for the life she had been given. Every morning, she would wake up and think about Isaac, about the man who had saved her in so many ways. She would trace the faded scars on her arms and remember his kisses, his whispered words of encouragement, his unwavering belief in her strength. When Josephine passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 88, her family gathered to celebrate a life well lived. They told stories about her courage, her kindness, her dedication to teaching and justice. They talked about the love she had shared with Isaac, a love that had become legendary in Republic and beyond. And in the small cemetery outside of town, they buried her beside Isaac, reuniting the couple who had found each other in the darkness and built a life filled with light. Their headstone was simple but meaningful, bearing both their names and the dates of their births and deaths. But beneath that, their children had added an inscription that captured the essence of their love story. She survived, they loved, they lived. And so ended the story of Isaac Fletcher and Josephine Durant, two people who had proven that love could heal even the deepest wounds, that courage could overcome the darkest trauma, and that a life built on mutual respect and devotion could be the greatest adventure of all. Their legacy lived on in their descendants, in the students Josephine had taught, in the horses Isaac had bred, in the community they had helped build. But most of all, their legacy lived on in the story of how a broken woman and a kind man had found each other in a rough mining town in the Cascade Mountains, and how they had chosen to love each other through everything that came after. It was a love story for the ages, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of compassion and devotion. The scars had been real, the pain had been real, but so had the healing, the love, and the beautiful life they had built together. And in the end, that was what mattered most.